Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be reviewing the implementation of Nigeria's development plan. In December 2021, the country's president unveiled National Development Plan, NDP 2021 to 2025. The unveiling signaled the takeoff of another medium-term plan as Nigeria marches towards Agenda 2050, the nation's long-term development plan, which replaced the Vision 2020, the one that proposed to put the country among the 20 most developed economies. Let me not digress. Now, Agenda 2050 has, among other goals, the lifting of 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within 10 years, and the NDP 2021 to 2025 targets economic growth and development, infrastructure, public administration, and human capital development, as well as social and regional development. Nigeria has a relatively long experience in development planning, beginning with the Colonial Development Plan of 1958 to 68 to the Vision 2020. Yet, none of these plans has ever been fully implemented. Not to go too far back in the interest of time, a recent instance is the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, ERGP 2017 to 2020, which just ended. It promised Nigerians investment totaling $245 billion, with the federal government contributing 49 and the private sector 196 billion. For that quantum of investment, Nigerians were promised a GDP growth of 4% in 2017 that will rise to 7% in 2020. Let's not forget the power supply of 10,000 megawatts a day. None of these targets was met. This is reminiscent of most other development plans put forward by various governments. And now, in the twilight of this current administration, the question would be, what hope is there that anything will be different? Are there any mechanisms to ensure continuity when a new government takes power come 2023? The country is preparing for elections next year. Is this current plan implementable? If yes, how exactly is it different from others that failed? For a better understanding of what is at play here and what the nation's chances are with this development plan, we are joined by Dr. Sam Ikoku. He's a productivity consultant, investor, author, and managing consultant at Nakachi Consulting. He was also a member of the Technical Working Group on Governance, Institutions, Administration of Justice, Anti-Corruption, and National Orientation, tasked with developing the Medium-Term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 by the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. Quite a long introduction, but a warm welcome to One Slot, Dr. Ikoku.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so let's start with a basic understanding of why national development planning is important and some of the criteria that you use to assess a good development plan.
Well, national planning is important because on a day-to-day basis, you have economic upheavals, you have social challenges, you have international dynamics that affect any nation. And if you just dependent on that, you'll be in a reactive mode most of the time, which means you're always trying to catch up. So the reason why you have short, medium, long-term plans is because you've determined what's good for your people, what's taking advantage of your geographical competencies, what's taking advantage of your natural resources, what's taking advantage of your human resources. And then you set out and say, okay, I'm going to achieve this by this time and that by that time. Hopefully, all organs of government, as well as the public, would dovetail towards achieving those things within the set time. So you can manage resources better, you can monitor your own progress, you can course correct or pivot as you go along, making sure that the ultimate objective, of course, is achieved. And that's the whole essence we have had, for national planning all these years. And the most dramatic being Vision 2010, Vision 2020, and now we're looking at the Nigeria Project 2050.
Okay, let's go back a bit. The one for 2020 that just ended, Would you say that vision captured some of the criteria with which you used to measure a good development plan?
Well, I must say this, not just Vision 2010 or 20, Nigeria is brilliant at planning. I do happen to know some countries literally look at what we do when it comes to planning. We've got great minds, we've got great institutions that can put the thoughts together. Vision 2020 was supposed to give us a clear breakaway. And people say Vision 2020, but it's Vision 2020 to be among the top 20 economies by the year 2020, which was 2 years ago. We were trying to leverage, the Obasanjo administration was trying to leverage on our population, natural resources, and the drive and the zeal and the need to go back to our glory days as big brother on the continent and show some progress. It did establish certain critical factors, though. We decided to articulate properly what soft issues meant, like national development, like competitiveness, like growth, percentage of people in school, infant mortality, and all of it. We attempted to put numbers to those things. And for me, it was the first time we really came down to humanizing the goals and the plans for the country. I was in Vision 2020 as well, and I was in the thematic group on national competitiveness. But unfortunately, I have to admit that nothing we planned has been achieved.
Okay, so, but you've already said there are some things that we humanized our goals a little more, but are there things that you could maybe just identify off the top of your head that we're able to achieve with the 2020 plan, or even help to prepare the grounds for this new plan that we have?
Look at innovation, for example. We did look at human capital development. And all of these things gave rise to the need for Bureau of Public Service reforms, for example. It looked at breaking some ministries up into their more tactical components. For example, now we have innovation, communication technology, and all of that. And it was supposed to be a time for us to begin to streamline. You had the Osanya report, streamlining agencies to remove duplications and so on and so forth. But I must admit that the implementation fell short. And that's what we're attempting to take care of in the new plan that we have.
Okay, there are a lot of proposals in the Vision 2020. I wanted us to just get that as a basis before we move to the new NDP. I'm going to take just two. We'll try and talk about it and talk about maybe what we have contained in this new plan that will help with the implementation. I'd like us to take on the crude oil production part of things and improving our refining capacity. The plan for 2020 was to revive our moribund refineries and stop the importation of fuel by 2019. What would be your honest assessment of that sector? Did that plan help in any way to maybe inform decisions that was taken in this new NDP as to how we will go with reviving our refineries?
Well, if you target the oil sector in terms of production, refinery, and distribution, we failed woefully in achieving that because we still don't have the refineries working. The cost of turning them around, sending them up, it's been cheaper, it seems, getting this refined products into the country. However, when you look at the subsidy that has been spent, huge amounts of money that's been spent, we could have gotten all those refineries going and probably even built one or two new ones and improve the distribution for those products without destroying our roads. The truth is the implementation part was totally devolved from the planning part of it. And you well know that we still haven't achieved anything in that area. Instead, we've had IOCs leaving the country. Our fuel situation is still poor. We're still subsidizing petroleum products. And, that part of, and the fact that we're literally a monoproduct economy means that everything else was taken backwards. You can say the same for power infrastructure. Nothing was achieved.
Yeah,
and the problem was with the implementation.
We always seem to have that. You actually highlighted that we don't have a problem with creating policies, but where we always fall short is with the implementation. But I want to believe that something good must have come out of the Vision 2020. You were part of the team that came up with this new NDP. Would you say there is anything? Okay, let me rephrase that. The planning of this 2021-2025 was said to involve more parties. That was one of the complaints of the previous plan, that people weren't carried along. So with the involvement of more persons, I'm speaking purely from a layman's understanding of the whole scenario. So what would be some of the things that you would say, I'm staying with the oil sector now, that failed woefully and is now being improved on with this new plan?
Well, let's start with what you said. The new plan had more people involved, more groups involved. I have never worked with any of the thematic groups that had to do with crude oil or petroleum products, even though I've offered consulting services to people like the Petroleum Equalization Fund and the Petroleum Pricing and Regulatory Products Authority. However, I wouldn't know about that in specific detail. I know, however, that coming off the Vision 2020, we looked at the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, which has finally been signed on. Everyone, local players, international players, agree that if implemented, it would be a very good way to jumpstart the transparency in the petroleum product industry. It came a little late, but it's here, and it's one of the fallouts of the Vision 2020 program. Hopefully, going forward, now that the sector players are being merged, hopefully we will be able to bring in efficiencies, both in terms of operations and production, and in terms of management, to improve the sector. So it's a bit late, but I don't think the dream is denied yet.
We always keep hope alive. What would you, I think maybe I was just picking without really checking the areas that you are more interested in with this new NDP. Would you tell us some of the features of the plan that stands out for you?
Well, for one, there were about 25, I think, technical working groups, thematic working groups. We had things like health and technology and innovation and all of that, given the sort of attention that they need. So we had experts going deeply into those areas, which is one of the things we didn't really have in the Vision 2020 plan. And we also had a lot of the consultants who came in this time came in more from a patriotic perspective, and they had more experience in the things that they needed to do. So they kept the round pegs and the round holes, as it were. However, there were still lapses. I mean, in my own thematic group, my working group, which was governance, institutions, administration of justice, anti-corruption, and national orientation, we had a great group of people, but national orientation was not a part of it. And one of the first things I said was, we can't speak for national orientation when we have a national orientation agency. So fortunately, national planning was flexible enough to notice those lapses and respond to the advices that were given. It's not for, if I'm to take my own thematic group, it's not for lack of the quality of the input. Again, it's about the implementation. And while I have ideas on how it should be done, it wasn't part of the terms of reference of our group.
Okay, I mean, you have this opportunity to share with us some of those, ideas that you feel will actually make this. The time is pretty short. We're already 2020. We're already in 2022. But like you said, something can be done. Let's talk about education. You mentioned that. For you, what are some of the things they talked about for education? I know they talked about educating more girls, improving on infrastructure and the likes. What part of the plan do you think has the highest possibility of actually working?
Well, we probably could improve on infrastructure because these are part of the capital expenditure that some of the institutions appropriate from the budget. Even though, even with infrastructure, we've not seen the kind of quality of deployment that we want. My concern with education is that we are still looking at it from the perspective of the third industrial revolution, and we should be looking at the fourth industrial revolution. We spend a lot of time on child education, which are issues we should have resolved 20, 30 years ago. My concern is in the curriculum of our education institutions and making sure that STEM is brought front and center and making sure that our students, our graduates are fit for business. Any serious company will tell you that we're spending far more than we should on re-educating the graduates that we have because the quality of education is bad. So for me, it's the curriculum, it's the monitoring and evaluation, it's the supervision, it's the standardization. Those are the areas that should be given attention. I'm not concerned so much with having too many schools. If the ones we have of the highest possible quality, there's competitiveness in getting people into them. I think things like setting cutoff points for different people from different parts of the country is institutionalizing uneven, unbalanced development in education. So I would have wanted something a little bit more revolutionary, but that's just me.
I mean, that's the whole point of this conversation. And please don't hold back with the ideas and the comments as to how would a way that will be better. Because at the end of the day, what we seek is a better Nigeria, one that will be good for all of us. Let's jump. Something that's connected to education is the level of employment and the rate of poverty in the country. For the 2021 to 25, the plan was to remove 35 million people from poverty and create about 21 million new jobs. The ultimate goal is 100 million people out of poverty. I mean, what part of this plan do you think actually addresses the getting people out of poverty? We keep hearing this every other time.
Well, I don't, with all due respect to my colleagues who worked on it, and I know they have the same constraints, but they had to come up with something, and they did a good job if you've looked at the document. However, I think we are looking at employment from a totally unrealistic perspective. The plans we have for employment require that government continues to be a key employer of labor, and that government continue to appropriate a lot of its resources into recurrent expenditure, which is unsustainable. I would have thought that the idea would be to empower the organized private sector, that they would have the level playing field and the sort of incentivization that's required for them to create jobs. But you find that regulation is clumsy. You find that getting licenses is tedious. You find that there's unnecessary bureaucracy, which doesn't help the private sector as such, who should be the ones driving employment. And then you also find that the technology is changing everything. Why are you looking to employ 100,000 people if you don't really need them to get the job done? So while we're talking about creating jobs, we should be talking about enabling through our tax laws, our incentivization, and so on, for people to create a free agent nation where people can freelance. They're still employed, but employed for themselves. People can weave between different sectors, take advantage of the flexibility that technology would allow them. We have to create infrastructure for entrepreneurs to have a place to gather and work from. We have to provide new types of capital that will help fund these enterprises. And also government should get involved in venture capital because it's just a transitory phase. It's almost like subsidizing the petroleum sector. Government has to do a little bit more than just say we have to create jobs. They have to put money in venture capital through private equity firms. They have to allow the pension fund administrators to invest in startups and so on and so forth. Of course, they should be regulated. They have to soften the tone and the spikes needed for you to take your company public. There's a lot that has to be done in that space to create jobs. It will never happen by just saying we want 100 million jobs. We still don't have financial inclusion around the country. We still don't have broadband internet around the country. We still don't have anybody watching over telecom companies to make sure that there's a service you need. There's a lot more. The jobs will create themselves if government can focus on the environment needed to make jobs of interest to the organized private sector.
You don't seem to hold out much hope with focusing on creating jobs. So, I mean, on providing employment. So what would you say about the social protection for the unemployed? We don't have data bank per se. We have it scattered everywhere. You have BVN, you have your driver's license, you have the national ID card. So which of the database are we going to? How would social protection work in Nigeria as currently constituted?
Well, I hope you're not trying to push my buttons because it's all about the contract. Okay, if you have the BVN with the banks, you have a database with the motor vehicle service, you have immigration, you have a national identity management, whatever. All these people, the same intelligence it takes to put up all these databases is the same intelligence it needs to integrate them as one. And if you remember when the whole pandemic thing came and there was supposed to be palliatives and they said they gave out a lot of money to people. How? Where did they find the people? What was the criteria that was used? On which database were they? So I don't hold out much hope for social protection unless you know someone in the place where they can help you, because the databases don't exist. I mean, who are the people who've received all of these things? It's not transparent to me, so I'm sorry. I wouldn't want to offend anyone. Maybe somebody knows more than I do, but I would have thought that as a social observer, I would have been able to see and measure to some great extent this so-called social protection. I don't see much of it.
I actually have a follow-up on that, but we need to go on a break now. When we return, we'll be focusing on the key goals of the NDP and subsequently the strategies for implementation. If we have the time, don't go away. Good to know you're still with us. I still have Dr. Sam Ikoku speaking with us on the National Development Plan, Agenda 2050. Let's talk about implementation. When we started this conversation, you did say that Nigeria doesn't have a problem with policy formulation. Our problem is implementation. So do you think this plan is implementable? Let's take the time frame that we have, 2021 to 2025.
Yes, very much so. One of the things I know for sure was this particular document was put together by a realist. If I'm to judge from the quality of the debates that we had in my own thematic working group, we had those who were dreamers, we had those who had their feet on the ground, but everything we did, we tested, said, okay, where are we now? What's possible? We tried to do a pre-mortem, what could go wrong? And we tried to come up with things that would happen if the will was there, because government is the key driving force of this implementation. So I think, at least from my end of it, and I think the entire document, because the superstructure for the document was a group of experts who coordinated everything. So it is implementable. And if it wasn't, I don't think it would be approved. And that's where the problem begins. You cannot implement a document like the Nigeria 2050 project or any part thereof simply by approving it.
Fair enough. Let's get an understanding on how the whole process came up, because you talk about the different teams that work. Tell us about your team and some of the proposals that you put forward that found their way to the end document, or the ones that did not and you think should have been there.
Well, your question reminds me of the robust debates that we had. You know, we also had eggheads. We had people from the universities who were there, and they would take us down rabbit holes on definitions and case studies, which was necessary to flesh out all of our reasons. It was robust, sometimes tiring. But we had a coordinator who had a way of bringing things together. We had some fantastic people who were assisting. We had people from the ministry who were helping to keep everyone on target and on task. So I would say from my group, which was a large group, we had to deal with administration of justice, we had to deal with national orientation, we had to deal with institutions, we had to deal with governance. So you just want to imagine the amount of debates we had. But we did come away with one or two very simple things. Unless and until we fought corruption, unless and until we had strong institutions, nothing in our thematic group or any of the other thematic groups would really work. So it was challenging to see that happen, and I learned a lot. Looking at corruption, I had to look at corruption from so many different perspectives. Corruption is not always about just bad people doing bad things. If you have a standard of living that's way below, you had a standard of living that's the cost of living that's way higher than the minimum wage. You put people under what I would call induced corruption. So you can't say don't give, don't take if people don't have enough to feed their families. We've got to be very honest about that. And then we've got to have, our public servants well paid, because if someone is an incredibly bad person, if he's paid well, he may begin to recalibrate his values to where he will say, I want to do the right thing. And then also you discover that if people get away with crime, if people get away with unruly behavior, it feeds into the corruption narrative. People are driving on the road and there's a queue and there's traffic and someone decides to form a third or fourth and a fifth lane. And they still go into the front of the queue and get allowed into the queue. So it says to those who are in the queue, you're stupid. You have nothing to do. You have nowhere to go. And so we have to trickle it down, all the way down, even to our homes. So that, you see, corruption is literally being forced on most of the population because of this disparities between cost of living and minimum wage, disparities between those who run political office and those who have to work really for a living, and so on and so forth. Having said that, We all know that corruption should be addressed. We all know that the institutions that we have, like due process, the tax agencies, the anti-corruption agencies, the financial crime commissions, they should be strengthened. They should be able, there should be no sacred cows. We want to see the beheadings of, to use a very crude phrase, of powerful people. You know, when powerful people stop getting away with screwing the system up, as it were, people will begin to sit back and pay attention and decide to do the right thing. So there's a lot that's there, and we're hoping that over time we will see results. I'm particularly happy with the ICPC, with the kind of things they've been doing. They found their feet, that they find themselves, they're doing things. I'm happy with the new approach the EFCC is using, getting things done. And these are some of the things we hoped and prayed for. And we believe that if that's put in place, if you can deal with the corruption and the lawlessness and the unruly behavior of people and the unpatriotic commitment of the Nigerians, as it were, almost every other thing will fall into place.
True.
And so that was one of the great things that came out for me.
That's so true. I'd like to pick your brains on the conversations you had about building strong institutions, because even to fight corruption, you said it yourself, we need strong institutions. What are some of the ideas that was put forward to actually achieve this? Because we need all the help we can get.
Well, I can't, I've never really worked in the public service before, but my experience in the private sector will give me some ideas, which, if you permit me to share.
Please do.
Number one, if you have institutions that have to do with broad-based, impact on the people, you can't have them to be political offices. You have to have people who've proven themselves, who are professionals in the field, who have a career and reputation to retain. If you put people who are political appointees into anti-corruption agencies, for example, I mean, how are they supposed to respond to their master's voice? How am I supposed to put away a guy who put me in office? And if you look at some of them, the way they're appointed into office is by people that they're also supposed to supervise in terms of moral values and so on. So such things have to change. You have to give them powers. Maybe go back to the National Assembly and rejig the powers of these institutions so they can look the president in the eye and say, you're wrong. Now, I doubt that anybody could do that right now. So we can't have strong institutions until we have strong laws backing those institutions, until we give them a certain amount of independence, and until we put professionals to run them and not political appointees. That would be my my suggestion.
Okay, let's see if we can take one part of this conversation, and that's continuity. Planning, people need to carry it out. And we know that sometimes governments come and they change their mind about what the previous government has done. Is there any place in this planning where continuity of these efforts was embedded for coming administrations to follow through with the plans that have been put out?
Yes, there is. Just the way there was in 2010, Vision 2010, the same way there was in Vision 2020. But I think what's more important now is for government to understand, and it's a simple concept, but it's so hard to make people understand this, that approving a document doesn't make the content of the document happen. For example, you know a little bit about this, probably you researched it because we have an interview or you have a liking for the subject, but you're just one of 120 million people, 200 million people. I mean, we don't even know how many people we have, And so the issue of approving the documents is not enough. The information contained in the document was put together by eggheads. It has to be translated for people to understand at street level. There must be schedules for implementing. A 2050 document doesn't happen at 2050. Certain things must happen at 2030, 2040, 2045, 2050. We have to have timelines. We have to have deliverables. We have to have responsibilities. And this must cascade down first to the implementing agencies and then to the general public, without whom it will fail. The general public for me includes the organized private sector, NGOs, and the masses, every man and woman walking on the streets. So do they know the plan? If they don't, you can bet it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. We must all know what's expected of us. Leadership presumes there's a followership. And it's one of the things we debated. The followers have a role to play, to hold leaders accountable, to follow the laws, to paint within the lines themselves, and yet be innovative, creative, and patriotic. So in the case of implementing agencies, the document has to be broken down further into, like I said, deliverables, timelines, and responsibilities. In the case of cross-functionality between MDAs and implementing organs, there has to be a strategic handshake, and an agreement on collaboration, expected deliverables, and timelines. The truth of the matter is, the plan is not the development.
True. Let me quickly interject here. Let me interject and ask you about there's a clause somewhere in the plan that suggests that one of the strategies to ensure that this NDP is attained is for ministries and departments to draw their programs and budgets and planning from the NDP itself. Do you think that is possible, and will that have any impact if it is done?
It's possible to sit down and draw a plan like we've done before, but the public service, with all due respect, the civil service, with all due respect, need the competencies to be sure that what they're doing is happening. You can't ask education to draw a plan without having a strategic handshake with finance, for example. You can't ask innovation, communication technology to draw a plan without them working with education, for example. And we've seen that most of our ministries, departments, and agencies are just silos. They operate on their own. Who's going to break the walls? Who's going to create the fluidity that allows for there to be a wave function, sort of, everything moving in tandem and so on and so forth? So if I had my way, I would actually have government create a commission for the 2050 project. National planning is national planning, not national implementation.
Sure. Okay.
So someone has to coordinate all of this on a daily basis and report to the government. And for God's sake, it shouldn't be a political appointee.
This administration is on its way out. And you and I know that the focus primarily in this twilight will be politics. Who succeeds who gets what. The job of implementation might really be in the back burner. But there is hope, like you said. One other key thing is security. In all of this, where does it coming? What is the framing for managing the security situation in Nigeria in a way that it will not hamper the implementation of the plan?
I would like you to redefine security. Are you talking about securitization of assets? Or are you talking about security of the people, lives, and property?
In Nigeria, it's basically security of lives and properties, really, because if you look at it, you have the banditry situation. It's still the civilians that, bear the brunt of it. And then you have terrorists on the other hand. So if people continue disrupting the peace of the place, there is no business that will thrive. Nobody will want to come out to work.
Well, I have my own views again, so forgive me.
Go ahead. That is why we invited you.
I can't speak for anyone else. One of the things that makes me extremely proud as a Nigerian is what late General Abacha did. We had a problem in Liberia. He took our soldiers there. We won the war. We won the peace. We set in a democratically elected government in Liberia. Almost nobody's done that. America hasn't done that in Afghanistan. It's not done it anywhere else. But suddenly I find our armed forces having to deal with ragtag, uncoordinated, non-ideology driven groups. And I'm wondering what's going on. I don't want to speculate. Maybe we've politicized our military and our security agencies. I don't know. But I think that we have professionals there. Give them the tools and give them the mandate and get out of their way. Security will be restored. That's the part that is
tricky. Getting out of the way and taking politics out is always an issue. Do you think there will ever be a fine line, clearly stated, between securing the people and politics? Because there are those who argue, I know this is a bit of a digression, but it's still important. There are those who argue that there are politicians who are benefiting from the seeming chaos when it comes to insecurity in the country. So will we ever get to that point?
We will, maybe after we've lost almost everyone, if we don't sit up. Because no matter how bad things are, it's benefiting someone. We don't have power in the country, but the lack of power is creating billionaires in our midst. So maybe when the ruling class begins to feel the pain, things might change. The truth is, however, that, I remember a quote from General Abacha. He says, if insurgency or something like that happens for more than 24 hours, then government is involved or something. I can't remember the exact quote. What I know is, if this administration leaves in the next few months without doing something about security, shame on them, because that was the basis for which they came. We can't have bandits running around the streets. We can't have that. Now we're talking about foreign investment. You asked me a question about Vision 2020 and all the investment they wanted to bring in. Who's going to put money here if you can't get your money out? So, they promised us security. We want security. I don't care if it's, you see, government, Nigeria is not about administrations. Nigeria is about continuity and common sense. And if security is as much a problem of this administration as the next, as the one before it and the one after the next one. So there has to be continuity. We have to give our professionals the space and the tools to secure our country.
When you talk about the professionals, do you think we still have those who are willing to do what it takes? Because we talked about implementation. Government is people. It is people that make up. Do we have the people that will do what is needed if push comes to shove to ensure that our development plan has some day in the sun?
Every sounding yes, we do have them. But we must give them space to perform. We should stop shackling them with unnecessary, ridiculous issues like politics, parochialism, nepotism, and so on and so forth. We have people. I mean, I want to believe you're doing this because you're passionate about the country. I don't think you're doing this just because you want to run a program. I'm here talking to you because I'm passionate about the country. There are people who are available to do this. And once you give them the opportunity, you'll be surprised how quickly Nigeria can be turned around.
Well, listen, again, when you talk about, I have a bit, when we talk about giving people the opportunity, the people that are there are taking what they want. So if these people that have what it takes to do what needs to be done, nobody's going to give anything to us. Don't you think so?
Well, I tend to agree with you that the kingdom of heaven suffers violence and the violent take it by force. However, one would think that leadership, which I always say is effectiveness at the point of main effort, would allow those people who want to make things happen have a chance as well. You don't always have to belong to a cartel, cabal, or whatever to be given a chance to do something. People should be allowed. And it's amazing what ordinary Nigerians will do. As much as everybody wants to emigrate, there are a few Nigerians who are passionately patriotic, and they should be given a chance as well.
I'm told we're almost out of time, so I would want to take your final thoughts on the issue of national development in Nigeria.
Well, for me, it's always been the same thing I've said since the Vision 2020 thing. There must be massive and sustained effort to take the message of Nigeria 2050, for example, to the people directly. If I had my way, a commission should be set up solely for this purpose, not one that's politically driven. I think our leaders should have a little bit more compassion for the people, feel their pain, and take decisions that would help. All of these plans are no use to the dead. We need our people to live long. We need our people to have the quality of life, the standard of living, to have the dignity to be able to speak up about their country and have faith in Nigeria again. If we can do these things, and do what we say and lead in a transparent, open, fair manner, I still think this is the greatest country on earth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sam Ikoku, for speaking with us.
Thank you.
My reflective thought in closing is that no country is perfect and no country has it all. But we can learn. We can learn from the achievements of others in certain crucial sectors. We need the will, like he said. The will come. It definitely will. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time on Felicity Ezewuike. Bye.